What's up, guys? I'm Jacob Blitzo, your Elixir Mentor, and I welcome you to the show. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. So let's get started. Today, I'm thrilled to have Michael Frew with us. Michael is an online business acquisitions expert, speaker, and educator who helps entrepreneurs acquire profitable, scalable, and durable online businesses. In 2021, he made waves in the Elixir community by acquiring Gigalixir, an Elixir-specific platform as a service. Michael, it's great to have you on the show. Please introduce yourself to our audience and share your story of transitioning from a corporate consulting job to acquiring online businesses. We'd love to hear about your journey and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, really great to be here. Thanks for having me. It's my first live event, so hopefully I do it well here. But yeah, really great to be able to talk a little bit about my experience of being a developer for the last 20 years. And then I think, like a lot of your listeners, I just never felt that exact match, that this is exactly what I needed to be doing with my career. So the transition happened after I took a really quick sabbatical. And during that sabbatical, I somehow stumbled on the idea of acquiring businesses instead of starting them. And I think us as engineers, we're always told how much we need to start our own business if we want to get out of the corporate world. And I never really knew that this avenue existed, that you could actually go out and look for a project that was already successful, already had cash flow, customers, marketing, and take that as an operator and scale that business up. So for me, once I kind of figured that out, I started small, bought a really small, it wasn't even a business, it was just a website. I really enjoyed running that. That's when I started moving up to 6 and 7 figure acquisitions and taking projects from other entrepreneurs where they wanted to move to something else. I'd take that project and run with it myself.
That's awesome. How would you what made you identify acquiring online businesses? Like what made you not like the corporate job or what you were currently doing, and what even brought it into your life?
Right. Yeah. So I think, again, like a lot of your listeners, I had what I call quarter life crises, where I just up and left my job. Right. It just wasn't fitting with me. It wasn't my mission. And I would step away for a month or two, or maybe even 6 months. One time I went back and got an MBA. And we all build these skills in technology, so we all kind of fall back into it. But each time I was trying to pivot and try and find something different that I wanted to do, I kept trying to start businesses, buying all these domains. I think, like a lot of your viewers, we have hundreds of domains of projects that we wish worked, and it just never took off. And as I looked back at my career, I was really good at operating, right? I was a really good firefighter for projects. I did a lot of consulting, so you drop in and kind of fix a problem. And once I kind of stumbled on this acquisition idea, and I wish I could tell you the original story of how that happened, but it just kind of fell in my lap at one point. I very quickly realized that this is what a person like me should be doing. And that's one of the things I want to get across, is that you don't always have to be the entrepreneur. We have such entrepreneur mania in our society. There are other people that can be out there that are doing operations, that can just focus on the marketing part. And you can take that real small gem of a business from an entrepreneur and grow it from there. So that all of a sudden I realized this is exactly like the consulting part that I liked, which is the firefighting piece. And I can start from something that's already working and continue to grow it. And so that's exactly where I felt like I fit into this business growth pattern. And I bet you there's a few viewers that are like me, where that would make maybe more sense than continually circling around and trying to start a business over and over.
Yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started the live stream. I feel like I'm the opposite of that. I'm really good at building, creating, and taking my idea and creating something, but I'm horrible at what comes after. Like, I don't know how to sell my product to people. And so
Yeah,
I think this is an
that's
interesting perspective, but also I've always had the mindset, and I think maybe you're right, we're a little overly consumed with the entrepreneur thing, right? And
yeah,
it's hard, because
yeah,
I've officially, I guess, I don't really like the word entrepreneur, but I've been living that for, pretty much 8 years, and it wears on you. And I'm also glad to
yeah.
hear I'm not the only one that has quarter life crises. I think I've had a few. I've
Yeah.
even had a minute in there where I wanted to become like a a wildlife photographer. So
Yep. I went through on one of them. I was going to be a truck driver. I was going to go work on an oil rig. Like you really start reaching those points where you just want to go do something else. And I also agree with you. I really don't like the word entrepreneur. So officially what people will call me is an acquisition entrepreneur. And I think that's the entrepreneur word is kind of what I'm saying. I'm not really that person. I'm more of an acquisition operator, I guess. So yeah, it's all these terms that kind of make a lot of us feel uncomfortable and that we're supposed to fit into that kind of small bucket, and you don't have to be in that small bucket.
Mm-hmm. I agree. What brought your sights to the Gigalixir acquisition when you first acquired it? It was in 2021, right?
Yeah, I think it was actually it might have been the end of 2020. Yeah, end of 2021.
Okay.
So my focus, because I came from engineering and development, I've always focused a little bit on cloud infrastructure, and I feel that rides out a lot of the waves of the economy. When we had a lot of, let's say, digital tokens were growing, people were using our software. Now it's AI, people are using our software while digital is kind of declining a little bit. So I love finding this infrastructure piece. And so I was actually on vacation, and a broker, since I've been in this for about a decade, a broker reached out and said, have you seen this business that's listed? And as soon as I read the prospectus, I knew. I was like, we have to get this. This matches the tech stack that we already use with my team. It looks like an interesting mission. I'm going to love the customers. It hit all those buttons right away. And that was it. Vacation ended, complete new focus. And it was tough, because Gigalixir is such a good business. It had a lot of people that were interested in acquiring it. So right from there, you have to kind of start doing your research, start talking with the seller, and try to start raising the funds to make the acquisition work.
Okay. Was it always Elixir focused? I believe
Yes.
it was. Yeah.
I think it started as Elixir focused, and then now anything that's got a build pack you can run on there. But obviously the name kind of implies where the original genesis came from.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, this might sound like a really dumb question. Is there specific places you look for startups that are listed for sale?
Yes. So this is one thing I think would be very helpful for viewers. There are brokers out there that list online businesses. It's just like the offline world. When I started 10 years ago, it was a bit of the Wild West. You were kind of just finding things randomly. People were buying sites off eBay, and a site called Flippa started coming out, but that's a marketplace. So it can be a little bit of a Wild West there. They've really improved over the last decade. But there are brokers out there that specialize in different types of businesses. So if you're really good at Amazon or e-commerce, there's brokers that specialize just in that. If you're into SaaS software like I am, there's brokers that specialize in those. So it's a pretty simple Google search, or you can reach out to me. I'll let you know which ones that I use. There's more and more brokers every day because this industry is really maturing as an asset class that people want to invest in, and like myself, just want to work in.
That's awesome. So what due diligence did you do when you saw Gigalixir and knew it was something that you wanted?
Right. Yeah. So I would say it's all the same due diligence that everyone's going to do on a business, right? You're going to check and make sure that there's no bad backlinks, that there wasn't anything, gray or black hat hacking to get their rankings, make sure the software actually works. You run through the kind of the customer list to make sure they're legit and they're not just family members. Have these people been paying for a long time? Those kind of things. And I think what your viewers will have the biggest challenge with in acquisitions is code review. Reviewing software of somebody else's business is actually quite difficult, right? First of all, you don't want to turn the code over to somebody you don't know, even if you have contracts signed. And auditing code in a short period of time, especially for a business that's really, really desirable, so people want to put in their offers really quickly, you don't have like a month to review code. I think you can agree that a lot of engineers don't put a lot of commenting in their code, so that doesn't help you too much. So in a little bit, you have to know the seller and kind of trust them a little bit, kind of understand. If you read the customer questions, you can tell maybe how good the product really works. And one thing that I did is me and the lead developer that was going to work on it, we actually flew out to the seller and we got into a room and we had him walk us through the code, which put us kind of ahead of the rest of the buyers because nobody else did that. And it gave us a really comfortable feel about what the seller had put together. We kind of built out our own documentation doing it. So that is going to be the hardest thing, right? The software review code, but everything else is pretty standard due diligence that you would do for any acquisition.
Yeah, I can't imagine having to go through code base fast and determining if it's good or not, because
Yeah.
I've been in the startup world for, close just over 8 years, I think. And, it'll take sometimes 6 to 8 months just to even fully understand a code base that you inherit. So,
Yeah. And that's true once you acquire it too. So what I always say is that first year, we're not touching anything. We're just figuring out how it works, fix any major glaring problems, find where those scalability problems are going to be, like where are customers starting to bump against the edge, and let's plan that out. But it's exactly like you said, it takes about a year for us to get our head around the whole thing. And you'll see there's a lot of people that say, hey, I can buy a business and flip it in a year for 3 times what I paid for. That's not really true in software. I mean, it could be true, but that's not my experience. And when you're buying software in SaaS, that's going to be more like a content site or an Amazon store that you can make work better. In this one, you're looking at something that's going to be a multi-year project. So it should be something you really enjoy doing when you acquire it and you're excited to work in that business.
yeah, you're in the hardest part of it, right? Because you have to just grow it now.
Yeah.
You're not in the exciting MVP phase anymore. What's like a typical timeline you see for startups? Like, when do they decide they want to sell? When they have like $1 million in revenue, or like, what do you see?
That's a great question. So a lot of times it comes down to the seller. So you really want to find out when you're acquiring. So what is the seller's real reason for selling, right? There's times that you can sell because the seller wants to work on something else. If you think of like a lot of entrepreneurs, you have multiple projects going at the same time. And what if one gets funding or one of them takes off and you've got these 3 other projects that you just want to get rid of? So maybe it's going to be at that stage. You can sell a business if it's just making a few $1,000s a month up to millions of dollars a month. There's really no point where you see businesses for sale like, oh, it hit 500,000. Like that's when they start falling off. Each sale has a different reason of why the seller is going to be selling. And it's really just important to understand that and make sure that jives kind of with your goals as well.
What are flags for you to look for? What piques your interest when?
Yeah. I bet my flags are different than some people would say. I typically don't want someone selling for a negative reason. So I don't want someone selling because they failed to pay their taxes or it's a divorce or them and their partner are in a fight. I want someone that's selling that almost doesn't really want to. And if I think of all of my sales, it's always because, one of them did get funding in their other investment. One of them got an awesome job, a great company he wanted to work for, and he had to divest. One of them got a venture capital opportunity and he wanted to go move into that business. So each of those was, hey, I was working perfectly fine. And then all of a sudden I just had to sell it because something else better came along in my life. For me, that's the kind of business I'm looking to buy. But there's other people that will say, oh, look for real big problems and then, swoop in and get it there. And that's just not quite how I do it. But,
what about just like entrepreneur mindset people that are just ADHD and want a new project?
Yep. I would say there was a huge increase in businesses for sale as soon as AI became kind of the official thing over the last year. Everybody wanted to dive into that. And you saw a lot of really good businesses come up for sale because the goal was like, listen, I'm focused on this right now. So that was a great opportunity for someone like me. And then, obviously AI is going to stick around, but there'll be a phase where like that first round of AI businesses want to go for sale because round 2 of AI is coming out. Mm-hmm. So that's fantastic. You kind of follow what's going on in the market. And then you'll see some of those businesses come up for sale that are running really well, but entrepreneurs are moving to the next thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to jump on the hype bandwagon.
Yeah.
NFTs are done. Now it's AI.
Yep. I think that was exactly what I saw.
Well, I think the cool thing about AI is at least there is a minimal benefit behind it right now, right? Like with code completion and, just in like general assistant kind of tech. So like people are actually able to use it versus like NFTs was the weirdest technology boom.
Trying to figure out what I'm using it for. Yeah. It had immediate benefit. And so there's just no reason not to say, oh, if I can see something with immediate benefit, let's move to that direction.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, why do you believe that like IT professionals or engineers should consider buying versus starting from scratch? Like, where do you draw the line? Like, what if they have a fantastic idea? Like, where do you choose?
Yeah, so there's the big argument of, is it the idea or is it the execution, right? And so that we've spilled a lot of digital ink over that question. A lot of times the people I'm trying to speak to is the engineers that have the golden handcuffs, which I think a lot of us get into. We're a pretty well-paid industry, and it's very hard for us to move laterally if we decide we want to do a career switch or we just don't like working in a corporate environment anymore. The challenge is we might have family, we might have obligations, house, car, and we're doing really good financially. So one aspect or one avenue you could take with this is, what if I could buy a job that would pay me the same or more with this unlimited potential on the upside? And so I know, again, a lot of people say like, oh, don't buy a job. I'm kind of saying maybe look at buying a job that would replace your income. You're going to be the full-time developer, maybe bring on a partner, but it'll just be you. So instead of making your 250 at Google, you buy a business that you can make 250 that's your own business, and you're working on it your full-time job. That's just not an avenue anybody talked to me about when I was going through my 20 years and kind of found it myself. So that's the reason I'm on here, is just to kind of pass that along to people so that they can see, is this an option they might consider when I'm in my mid to senior years of my corporate career?
No, I love that. And honestly, it's a subject or even an avenue for, career growth. Is I never thought about it until I was introduced to you. And Michael from Paraxial is who made the introduction. And when I started looking into your profile, I was like, this guy has an interesting career path, and he has a lot to teach people, because I think, engineers, we either want to just work on a cool project and flex our skills and use our brain, or we want to be an entrepreneur and build something from scratch for, a lot of reasons, right? I could go in. I have a lot of reasons, and maybe a lot of them are like ego driven. I'm not sure, but
yeah, sure.
But it's a hard, it's a hard path.
Yeah. Especially the cool project thing, like you brought up, that, when you're acquiring a business, think about when you're working in the corporate world, right? You are always hit with projects that you probably don't care about. And you don't even know if they'll ever see the light of day. But this, I get to pick what projects I work on. And I'll say that's the first thing I look at when I read a prospectus or someone pitches a business. Is this fun? For me, I love talking to engineers all the time through customer service. So do I get to do that with this business? Is this business helping other companies solve important problems? That is interesting to me. So yeah, you get to kind of pick your own cool projects that you get to work on.
And I will say, Gigalixir has great customer service.
Oh, good. A lot of times it's, sometimes you're hitting me, sometimes you're hitting the team. Yeah. I handle almost everything that's not technical. I try and do that. And so let me step back to that engineer question you just had about maybe taking a job. I also am not super great at that whole philosophy of working outside of your business instead of in it. I love doing the operations. I love being in customer service. I love trying to figure out what we're doing. When people have problems, how do we help? So I don't do a great job of being outside of the business, but if you like doing that operations stuff, this is such an interesting opportunity. I get so excited every day when I get to just wake up and check out what's going on in the customer queue. As long as nothing's on fire, then it's awesome.
How do you manage your time between multiple companies?
Right. It's so the way I've kind of set it up, and this has been half luck and more planned as time went on, is trying to get businesses that all have roughly the same stack or some kind of related technology. So we're not going to go out and buy like a bunch of PHP companies and then try and run Gigalixir at the same time, right? Because then I've got two completely different groups of people that are going to work on it. So all my engineers split their time across the different companies as well as myself. So that's where that vertical of, we're always talking to engineers. It's always going to be SaaS. We don't do any long sales cycles. Like, it's always a pretty instant sign up with a nice, easy onboarding. So those things we try and make all the same so that you can work on 3 or 4 different businesses. But as you get closer to the core of the business, it's roughly the same stuff. Okay.
So yeah, you share your tech team across all platforms.
Yeah. And try and keep all the mental energy in the same bandwidth there.
Well, that's good too, because it's hard to grow a development team that like each other and get along and work well together too. So that way, I'm guessing as you acquire more companies, it's just easier to already shift your core group of developers or engineers.
you want to keep them, I don't want them to get bored, right? I want them to continue to promote and learn new things. My goal is always to be the boss I never had, right? And so I look at all the things that I didn't like about my bosses and all the things I did like and try and do them both. So we try and have no standing meetings because I never liked meetings. I try and always, what kind of training opportunities do you guys want to do? Just let me know. Would you like to work on this new project? I'm looking at this business. Try and keep everybody involved. So hopefully that helps. I guess you can reach out to them and see what they think, but try and be a better boss than I ever had.
I hate meetings that aren't specific to a topic. Like it should be like done, like, reason for the meeting, finish, no like chit chat.
Yeah.
And like being in like the dev shop world for my day job, it's really interesting. If you work with people that are smaller companies, startups, they're usually the same mentality. But when you land like a corporate job, all they want to do is have meetings or call you on the phone and like take all your time away for their little project. And it's like this phone call could have been an email.
A quick email. Yeah. And that's another part of this cool part of you get to pick your projects. You get to pick your customers too. Everyone on my team has full authority to fire customers. Anything that they decide is like, all right, this is the wrong customer for us, or it's taking up too much of my time. We've turned away much larger business because we know that's what's going to happen. You're going to end up on meetings. You're going to have to fill out a ton of forms and documentation. And I say, you know what, we're doing fine. We don't need them. They need us more than we need them.
Uh-oh, I better be careful. If I harass Gigalixir's customer service too much, I'll get fired.
No, I think we definitely like a huge preference for indie hackers, smaller teams, smaller businesses that are trying to get going. The ones that we kind of shy away from is like if Microsoft or IBM approaches for some of my other companies, we just don't want that overhead, and I don't want that overhead. I still want to go on vacation and not worry about them calling me at 3 a.m.
Well, and I feel like there's a lot of red tape too when you start working with large companies like that.
Yeah.
A lot of
they'll tell you there isn't. And it shows up like 2 weeks later and you're like, oh, why did I ever say yes? Like lesson learned.
I'm sure. So I'm officially hosting my Elixir Mentor website on Gigalixir as of this week. So that's exciting.
Fantastic. Congrats. That's cool.
Yep. I've always been a like DigitalOcean, write my own deployment scripts, Nginx guy, but I was like, I'm going to just try the easier path for now. And we'll see how it goes.
A lot of times what I'll say is like, if that's, you have a business use case, right? You're trying to solve a mission, whatever it is, it probably isn't setting up your own scripts and all of that. That's probably not your business use case. So when you hit that point is kind of where you should give us a ring. Like we worry about that all day. You should be out solving what is that real problem that you're trying to solve instead of running all this stuff down here. And I know for engineers, that's tough. And it's always like, man, I could do this myself but the time that it takes and that 1 a.m. wake up call when something breaks, that's the problem.
Yeah, I'm slowly getting better at, using tools for the job instead of wasting my time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to shift. Yeah.
We're so used to doing it ourselves.
So you have an 8-step framework and advice for acquirers, right? Would you want to do like a quick walkthrough of what that entails?
Yeah, I'll make it nice and simple. You can relate a lot of this to real estate, buying just real estate assets. So even just think of like buying your house, right? So first you kind of have to assess what are you good at? What is it that you would be interested in? Like I said earlier, is it software? Is it e-commerce? Is it content sites? Is it advertising? So a little bit of assessment of who you are and what kind of lifestyle you want. Then the next thing is kind of to look for, all right, so where are those opportunities going to come up from? So those are kind of the first couple steps. And then you start looking at how am I going to get financing? I think that's a big question that people have. And there's actually 4 questions that I found people ask a lot. And I threw an answer to all 4 of them on my website. It's just me talking through, like we're just sitting at a bar of like, here's how I dealt with those 4 challenges. Once you kind of find something that you're interested in, maybe a certain business, how important that seller conversation is going to be, because you two are going to be working together, assuming that you're going to be the operator going forward. You two are going to be working together from how do we figure out how to do this? How do we transition, close everything? And then what is that ongoing support going to look like? Then as we spoke about the due diligence phase, which can be small, it can be huge, it can go 10 days, it can go 10 months. That one really depends on the business you're acquiring. Then you're looking at what happens at closing. How do you need to move money? What should you be prepared to do? What kind of business entity do you need? Business accounts, credit cards ready to make that transition. And then finally is the transition phase of what is the seller going to help you with? How much are you going to work on day one with customer service? Can you answer those questions on day one? So yeah, that whole framework, it's very similar to real estate where you're looking for an asset. You're talking to your agent and the seller. You have a kind of a due diligence process, which is blanking out of my mind, but inspection period, closing, and then transition to the new house.
So when, say you're new, you don't have a lot of savings, you don't have money, what is like a good financing plan of attack that you should be looking for?
Yeah. So the first thing I say is, this is why I'm talking right now. I'm trying to talk to Michael Frew of 10, 15 years ago, so I would know that this was an option for my career and I would start saving money. And I would think of it as just like I'm saving for my first house, right? The more money you can save for this, the better it makes it for you. So once you have a little bit of cash saved up, hopefully if you're a highly compensated engineer, you can do that pretty quickly. In the last 10 years, there have been a lot of things that have changed that have added more financing for online businesses. There's companies that specialize just in financing for, let's say, SaaS businesses. Even the SBA, which in the United States is the Small Business Administration, they now do loans for online businesses. That's a huge change that really validated this space. So they'll loan you sometimes up to 80% of the business amount, where you just have to put a little bit in. And so between companies doing it, the SBA, there's just a lot more financing opportunities that are coming around. So it's more like off-market acquisitions, where there are a bunch of different ways that you can layer on financing and make it work. So if you only have the 20%, you can find that other 80%.
Okay. Do you ever finance with partners, or do you keep everything close?
Each business is different. So most of them is just myself, but I actually brought on a partner for one of the acquisitions. He was one of the engineers. And so let's just do this together and see if that kind of helps you. If you're interested in doing this in the future, let's try just buy a little slice and see what it's like to not only kind of work on a project, but also to profit from how well it does. So typically it's myself, but I'm always interested in bringing in partners if they're working in the business with me.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. When you first acquire a company, things are so before I was in software, I was in manufacturing, and I just look at like the nightmare of a factory. Like if someone were to buy a factory, the ins and outs, you have the same concept when you're writing code. It's just, electronic mess, right? What kind of like transition periods do you expect to have working with like the people stepping out of the picture?
Right. It might depend on the complexity of the business. And that's something you kind of a lot of the sellers know when they're selling. They'll offer like, hey, I'll do 30 days of help. But others will come up and say, listen, it's probably going to take about a year to transition me and my partner out of this.
If you were to use like Gigalixir as an example.
Yeah. What we did for that was, and hopefully my memory is correct, I think what we said was maybe 30 to 60 days of just hands-on transition, which is seller and dev team basically talking and walking through things, getting all that going. Then after that, it was like, hey, just stay on Slack. We might ping you because some things happen quarterly, and so we haven't seen it in the last 3 months. Stuff will happen every once a year. And, a customer will reach out and we're like, we don't know what's going on here. Let's just reach out to the seller. So after that 30 to 60 day period, the seller should be pretty hands off, except for a question here or there. And that's usually not an issue.
Okay.
So I've never really experienced a seller like walking away. And I know a lot of people put a lot of contract terms in there, so that doesn't happen. But if you make that relationship, that you're buying and selling and you two are working together on this to make it successful, you're typically not going to have a seller that takes the money and just runs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, they don't want to see their baby die, right?
That's the important thing. Yeah. And we've talked about that from day one of like, what's the mission of the business? What were you trying to do? How do I help keep that mission going and make it better? So, if the seller believes in you, right, then they shouldn't want to just walk away.
Yeah. Well, I still feel like 30 to 60 days seems really quick for, most of the reins, but that's impressive. I like that.
Yeah, it helps if you can think of like, hey, within 1 quarter, I'm pretty much ready to work on something else and I've got a chunk of cash in my bank. that can help me with that new project.
Yeah. So I guess like a big part of where you step in, right? You're stepping in, the company's no longer an MVP, like it's turning into a decent product. And like in Gigalixir's case, a pretty well-known pass, right?
Yeah.
And when you start doing that, when like do you start deploying like your own roadmap and features you want to add to the platform? And like how soon do you start thinking about those things? I know you mentioned a year before,
Yeah.
but
Right. Yeah. So typically the seller's going to have a little bit of a roadmap that they were planning. So we start with that, and then we just listen to what comes in. I remember with Gigalixir, we started a spreadsheet of people asking for this, that, and this, and that's a great piece. Is you get so much information from customer service of what are we missing. So we would look for things that hit one or two, three, four times, and that might be the direction we're moving. So yeah, like each business kind of dictates to you a little bit, but we still try and not touch anything. The goal is don't break anything. And then slowly start to add features as we get comfortable working in that infrastructure, making sure that we're not messing anything up. So yeah, it's a slower process. And so I think maybe I'd hate to say this, but with an acquisition, you might have a little bit of slowdown in features while that transition is occurring, and then new things will start coming in.
I think that makes a lot of sense because you don't want to just start building on top of possibly spaghetti code and kind of break your product that you just acquired.
Right. I think every developer shows up on a project and says, "Oh, I could do this better." Right? I mean, it always happens. You look at everybody. Nobody likes anybody else's code.
Yeah, no one likes inheriting code, and I actually feel really bad for some of the things I've said in the past about developers' code that I inherited, because I'm sure people say the same thing about mine when they inherit it.
Yeah.
So
I was nervous to hand it over to someone else because I was like, I know what they're going to say.
Right. The importance of doing pull requests with honest engineers too, right?
Yeah, right.
You got to be torn apart. I remember one of my first pull requests. I was just stepping into tech. I was, proving myself. So I worked 10x what I was being paid for because I just didn't know things. And my first pull request, I had like this ugly, horrible, like nested if else statement block, and it looked like a Christmas tree. And to this day, I believe the engineer that I was working with would probably make fun of that pull request to me. Because I remember,
definitely keeps it.
Yeah.
It's like a nightmare.
Yeah. Can you share any exciting future plans with Gigalixir and anything that might affect the Elixir community?
Yeah. Let me think about we're looking to actually expand outside of Elixir as well, to make it more focused on, kind of increasing the number of languages. But really, we've been working a lot on how do we make it more bulletproof? How do we make it more redundant for some of our medium to size and larger customers? So we're kind of working individually with each one to like, all right, how can we roll this out so this is more redundant for you, less latency, all that usual stuff. And then we kind of release that to the general community. That's been the big focus over the last year. I think I mentioned this earlier. One of the biggest things that you run across when you kind of buy a business from one entrepreneur is that scalability challenge. So that's kind of the first thing we look at is like, all right, if we're going to bring in bigger and better customers and they're going to continue to grow, how do we increase that scalability? How do we make sure this thing doesn't fall over? So that's something we're still pretty focused on right now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, are there any integrations that you're looking for Gigalixir, like to make it easier to integrate with like Phoenix projects? Like right now it's pretty easy, but you still have to manually, create like build scripts and things like that. Is there anything in the future with that, or not currently?
You have gone right underneath where I'm going to be with the tech team, right? So they've got their kind of list of things to do. And that's kind of what I like is I don't make them ask me like, all right, are we going to do this? They kind of see where the market need is and they just kind of keep pushing in that direction. So hopefully that is helpful for, the general customer community. We kind of want to solve everybody's problems at once, but yeah, it can be a challenge to like, all right, here's our new focus. We're going to go after this piece of the project. But yeah, I try and stay out of that because again, as a manager, I'm not sure I'm providing any benefit by nitpicking in there and saying, all right, tell me all about this and what's that doing?
Yeah.
They're most likely just like, Michael, just stay out of the way. Like, we know where we're going with this.
Well, that's actually probably awesome. I'm sure your engineers love that. So,
Hopefully, yeah.
well,
If they need more direction, they can ask.
everyone likes to run their own projects, right? And being
Yeah.
micromanaged doesn't benefit anything.
Yeah, hopefully I'm not micromanaging them at all. But yeah, that probably means I have a little ignorance of like some of the direction that you're going. Unless I see major issues coming in customer support where I feel like I've seen something 10 times. I'm like, all right, maybe can we solve that real quick and then go back to whatever you guys are working on?
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Well, we can shift this a little more towards your expertise because I think that's just beneficial to everyone, right?
Sure.
Why do you believe investing in online companies would like outperform other asset classes?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question. So if you look at kind of the three general ways that people make kind of grow wealth, it's going to be equities and debt, and it's going to be real estate, and it's going to be owning businesses. So if I look across those three for our community, where we have such an invested interest in technology, a lot of us do look at equities. A lot of us put some of our extra cash into real estate, but that's not really our specialty, right? That's going to be like a side job. Or you could look at kind of capitalizing on the assets that you've created of yourself and invest in a business that you could actually be operating or you could be a partner with. So for me, that was just the best use of where my time and money was going to go because I can grow that wealth faster and then maybe put the money into real estate. But I kind of still continue to double down on the software and SaaS segment. So for me, that just meant, all right, I need to either be running a business or acquiring a business. And since we all have that skill set, I always say the hardest part of running a tech business is knowing the technology stuff. So we all know the hardest part of this business. You can learn how to run a company. If you look at all the businesses that are out there on Main Street and you see how poorly some of them are run, we can all do better than that. So you can learn accounting, you can learn a marketing, you can hire someone for marketing, you can learn all that stuff. You can learn how to do all the licensing and the bookkeeping and the taxes. But knowing the technology stuff, that's where we have a real leg up. And that's why I'm always telling developers, look at acquiring a business because you already can do the hardest part of that company.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. But the accounting and book work and marketing are not fun, at least from my perspective. It's seriously the worst part.
Yeah. And I cringe when I hear people saying, oh, operating an online business is easy and they're selling all these courses. Man, there's a ton of not fun stuff. So each of my businesses is in its own LLC, right? So I'm doing things in triplicate 4 times over, the exact same filings. You have to be able to put up with that certain level of suck to have the cool part, which might be like 20 to 40% of your day. But that's just part of it, and think about, even if you have a really cool project at a corporation, you still have the crap of timesheets. You still have to do the meetings, and you still have to do all this stuff that isn't the fun part. So, please don't ever please don't ever believe that it's like super easy and it's fun all the time because there's a lot of crap that goes with it.
Oh yeah. I think most of my time is stuff I don't want to do, but for the small slice of things that I love, it makes it worth it.
Yeah,
I find myself where I'll be doing too much administration work and I'll get in these funks and then I just have to, put a pause on it for a little bit and just build something for a couple of days and, then you're back.
It's a tough balance. Like right now it is mid-March 2024. So I think a lot of us business owners, we're looking at taxes and that's a huge project. And every day it's like, do I work more on Giga Elixir or do I tackle this taxes problem? And you always want to push that taxes thing off because this is the fun part over here. And there takes some discipline that, maybe this weekend it's taxes.
I'm really good at procrastinating my taxes.
Yeah.
If that was a skill that I could brag about on a resume, it'd be number one.
Number one skill. Yeah.
So now as someone that has successfully acquired like an Elixir focused business, what would your advice be to Elixir developers who are considering building and scaling their own products versus acquiring?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Again, my approach is always, I think it's better to acquire than to build unless that's your specific skill set. We've seen some pretty tremendous things. Again, my most favorite thing about being with Giga Elixir is just seeing the projects that people are making, the breadth of all of those tools and kind of missions that they're trying to do. So I think it's a fantastic kind of platform if you're just looking to start something, or even if you're looking to acquire something. There's obviously not a ton of Elixir businesses out there to acquire, but even looking at something that's parallel or similar, finding something that, I've got the technology expertise for this. It won't take too much of a leap to move over to this type of business. Maybe I could acquire that and start running that myself instead of building it on your own. I've heard a few acquisition entrepreneurs talk a little bit about, that idea that you were talking about at the very beginning of the interview. Go out and find that business, right? Someone else has had that idea. It's probably not unique. Somebody else has probably started that business and is not successful, but you might be able to run it. So that's kind of what I would say is, it's not Elixir focused, but kind of looking at what technology is out there that you might be interested in running.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. I never thought, like, you always do your market research, right? And I used to be disappointed to find out that my idea already existed, but it's also, right, it's a good proof of concept, right? So now you have
there's a market for it.
Yeah, you have a validation for it. And I never thought of approaching a company that already exists. So I think,
and I'll tell you, you get the same feeling trying to acquire a business. I always think, oh, this is such a cool idea. Who thought of this? And then I go out and find out there's 10 other businesses like it. And my enthusiasm drops for acquiring the business. I'm like, I thought it was the only one, but it's not. So it happens even when you're already into what I'm doing too.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I've had so many ideas and I'm like, nothing exists out there, right? With my 5-minute Google search. But then when you really start digging in, you're like, oh, wow, there's 5 other companies at least that are doing this. But that's okay. It's okay.
It is. It shows that there are customers for it.
Yeah,
which is kind of, it's almost more scary if you have a business that there really nobody else is doing it. That might mean that there's just no customer for it.
Well, and like Gigalixir is a perfect example. Look how many other services exist that do the same exact thing.
Yep. And we get worried, hey, we're the small little person out here and we got our small little business, but we're just taking a very small slice of that larger infrastructure piece. And for a couple of people that are running it, like, that turns out to be a nice lifestyle and a good job.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love that. All right. So when it comes to the Elixir community, it's small, it's niche. What have you found with engagement and just working with the Elixir community with Gigalixir and building a product for them?
Right. So the advantage is the smallness and is that it's niche. People are in this community because they want to be here, right? They weren't forced into it by a company probably. So it's very collaborative. People are doing really interesting projects. So I think that's what we like about it so much is it's just a really good environment to be in. It's a good environment to grow with. We enjoy the kind of the back and forth when we'll hang out in the same watering holes and try and help people with questions, even if it has nothing to do with us. That's kind of the camaraderie that I miss maybe from being in the corporate world is I don't actually get to talk to developers because I'm in this room all the time and I'm just by myself. And a lot of us have lost that with remote work. So to have a smaller niche group like that and to be able to kind of bat ideas and business ideas back and forth, it helps Gigalixir, of course, but it's just nice for everybody that's in the community, us are included, just to feel like part of a group. Yeah.
The remote work, you really do start to exclude yourself from like socializing and all of that. And I'm guilty of it. I probably put my head down for like 2 years as I was learning Elixir, building my fitness marketplace. And then I was like, I hate how much trouble I had getting off the ground and learning how to build stuff in Elixir. So I started my YouTube channel. And I was like, I was so scared. I was like, oh, I'm going to get torn apart, evil internet trolls. And I've never experienced a more welcoming community. Like, people are so thankful for just the content that I'm creating and all of that. And then now starting these live streams, I get to talk to people that are building amazing products and doing really cool stuff for the community. And so now it's forced me to socialize. even if we are all remote, we can have these awesome conversations
Absolutely. And
on
thanks
a
for doing
YouTube
this.
live stream. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for doing this for the rest of the community and yourself as well. Yeah. It's fantastic.
so it's been fun, and it
So the
forces me.
fitness, I was going to ask you about the fitness. Did you sell it? Did you keep running?
So I kind of just shut it down. And
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to kind of get out there is like, you don't have to shut it down. Somebody, even if it's $5,000.
Yeah.
I've bought a couple $5,000 small projects and we just let it run. So, for you in the community, there's always somebody out there that might acquire it.
Yeah. Well, like I shouldn't say it's a complete loss because I put a lot of systems in place for now, like developing, the API and video streaming and everything. And we had like a whole chat interface. So there's like a lot of tools that I developed that are reusable in new projects, but maybe I should spin it back up.
Yeah, you never know. So acquire.com is a place where a lot of people sell small projects that maybe don't even have any forward momentum.
Okay.
But hey, here's something that kind of works. If you are, and I can imagine if I was in my 20s to be able to pick up a project that, just for a few bucks that I could maybe turn it into a little bit of a side hustle cash flow, that'd be fantastic. So yeah, you're almost depriving someone of that opportunity.
Yeah, that's not a bad thought. Like, cause I ended up I got burned out in the fitness influencer space. And I didn't enjoy reaching out to, like, no offense if you're in the fitness influencer space, but I didn't enjoy working with them. Like, it wasn't for me. So that's kind of why.
That's a good thing to find out.
Yeah. Cause I'm super into fitness, working out, doing those things. And I was like, this is awesome. A place where you can just shop for, routines and things, and people, other fitness coaches can make money when you buy like a workout plan. And I hated onboarding influencers, but
that's good I always say, man, there's a certain part of your career where you should be finding out what you don't want to do. So now that it was obviously eye-opening for you, and like, let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah. And, the less I build things, the more unhappy I am. So like, as long as I'm in code base and doing things, everything stays good, but
good, nice and level. Yeah.
But then you're always battling the entrepreneur, pull too. Cause my problem is I get so busy, and the busier you get, the more creative ideas you start getting for other businesses. And you have to stop yourself from getting distracted by all the carrots that pop up in your mind.
That's one of the hardest things, I think, as a professional skill, is not to chase all the shiny objects, right? And it is a challenge to stay focused on one thing. And even look at me, right? I've got multiple businesses. So one might argue that I am also chasing a bunch of shiny things because I'll get bored with one and move to the next one. So yeah, it's a challenge for all of us. I think you can tell from my gray hair, I might be older than you. So it doesn't change as you get older.
Well, you might be doing it right, honestly, having all the options to jump. We have a question from Paraxial, Michael. He said,
hey, Michael.
What are some common mistakes you see in acquisitions from buyer or seller point of view?
Yeah. I would say, let's start with the seller side. Not preparing your business for sale for 12 months prior is the biggest issue. There's a lot of things that you can do to make your business look better, be better prepared for a sale. So if you are looking at maybe selling your fitness app, even 6 months ahead, there's a bunch of steps that you can do to make it better. And it's something like I have an email conversation with somebody about. It's not like I'm selling what those steps are. But sellers, I think, come into selling very unprepared, and they just list it in front of a broker. A broker tries to fix like the really obvious things. Big problems are mixing business and personal funds, having credit cards with personal funds. So I acquired a business where I got to learn the person's social security number because they didn't file a separate tax return. I got to see all of their personal credit card debt because they ran the business cards on there. And that told me something as a buyer. I realized, this person needs to sell this because they have a significant amount of debt. So for sellers, it's just being prepared and not just suddenly deciding to sell. For buyers, I think one is making sure that you can really access the funds when you need it to close. Brokers and marketplaces are really going to make sure you can do that. And they just don't want a bunch of looky-loos. And I think the other big thing I see buyers do is they don't kind of do that self-assessment of what I would like to run. They think, all right, I'm going to pivot from this job to running an Amazon store, and I'm just going to buy a warehouse, and all of that stuff suddenly happens. And they find that that's a lot harder than they thought. So just kind of that research of what am I getting into? There's usually an argument of should I start with something small, buy a small business first to see if I like it, or just put all the money into a big one. I started with the small idea. I bought that little website and I was like, okay, this is cool, and kind of went bigger. But yeah, making sure you know what you're getting into is kind of the biggest thing for the buyer. So I know those are both really broad answers, but for each person, I can always dig into deeper about that.
Okay. When you first bought your first website, was it more of a side hustle, or were you in between work at the time? What was going on in your life when that happened?
Yeah, technically I was on a sabbatical, but really it was like the third quarter life crisis. I just decided to name it differently to make it seem more professional. But yeah, I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And so that was just a small piece, I kind of, you apply for a school, you go apply for this, and I'll be like, let me go buy that business. And that's what took that traction on. I absolutely loved doing that. And I bet you do this too. You've probably bought a ton of courses on how to run an online business, how to do all the little pieces, marketing for engineers, all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for marketing and running social media ads, and I'm still not good at it.
Yeah. And so we do that. I did that for a decade, right? And so I had all the absorption, right? I was a consumer, but I wasn't a producer. So when I finally got this little $18,000 business, I finally got to put all that to action. And it was so invigorating and so fun. Probably the same as, for you, finally being able to do your live stream, get ads out there, finally put it to work. That's where I realized, oh, this is awesome. Why am I trying to start this myself? Let me just go buy it so I can just start operating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I also, when you mentioned that I'm glad I'm not the only one that just has a list of domains bought that I don't even use. Because every idea I have, I'm like, the domain's available. I need this.
Yeah. I think we all have, that whole set of domains sitting somewhere, and you keep renewing them because you think every year it's kind of like a reminder of how you failed a little bit. And you're like, I got to get back to that standing desk review site. I've got that one, somewhere. And, all these things. You're like, I'm going to get to that. I promise.
Well, what's funny is I don't know what I would call it, but it was definitely like a burnout stage where I just was done with tech. I didn't want to touch a computer anymore. And I lived in an RV for a year, and that's how I found the West. So I was living on the West Coast, and then I'm from the Midwest, and I never really knew about Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, this great little area. And I came out to visit my sister in an RV, and I just didn't leave. I was like, well, I need to experience a ski season in the mountains. And that was when I wanted to be a photographer. And then I realized that, I'm actually good at building things. So I probably should get back into tech and just be a little smarter about how many hours I pour into someone else's idea.
Yeah, that's totally the quarter life crisis that I went through, right?
Yeah.
You go back to it, but with a different perspective.
Yeah. And you have to be careful. I know some people will say burnout's not a thing, but losing interest and having no motivation to touch a keyboard again, that's a thing.
That's a thing. Yeah. Whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Whatever you want to call it. It's a thing. And I was ready to just, be a mountain hippie the rest of my life. Which I'm glad though, because now I have really fun hobbies that I break up my time with. So I get out, I ski, I rock climb, I go on great hikes and camping trips. And it's important to definitely break up your day with some of that stuff.
Yeah. And I would agree with the same, that a lot of my times when I would take breaks is where I found new things to do. And that's where all our stories come from. Mm-hmm. I don't have any stories of the 10 years I worked at some of these consulting places. I can't remember any of it. Yeah. But I remember what I did on each break, and that made the big changes in my life.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, it's interesting. It's an interesting life. I guess like, do you have any like big closing statement to motivate some
Yeah, sure.
developers
Motivate,
out
yeah.
there?
Yeah. So if you're kind of from the same background that you and I are, right? And like I said, I'm always trying to kind of mentor myself from 15, 20 years ago and just say, hey, Michael, this could be something you do in your future. So if you have questions about that, you can just reach out to me. So I've got my own website. It's michaelfrew.com. Not too tough. I'm not selling anything. Just reach out and ask questions. Anything that I can do to help. If you're interested in selling, if you're interested in buying, or how you would plan this out as a career, love to help, love to give back and see if there's other people that can kind of take this as a small career path that deviates a little bit from the normal path that people are doing out there.
I think it's a great perspective, and I believe I have all your links in the description of this stream. Yeah. And if I don't, I'll make sure I add them after this. But dude, thank you.
I try and get as much content out there as I can in between running all this stuff, so it's never as much as I want. But I try and write just from a buyer's point of view, because it's like real estate where all the information is published by brokers, so you don't really get that full spectrum of all the views. I try and write like, here's what buyers see. Here's what it looks like to be a seller. Here's kind of the annoying things. Here's the good things. Here's how brokers are trying to mess with you. So I try and put that stuff out there. So hopefully that helps.
Well, it's interesting. Like in every space that you work in, there are like dangerous things to be aware of. And so like with my dev shop, my business partner and I started a podcast from like the macro view of what entrepreneurs need to know that aren't technical. Because so many people will hire a dev shop and pay 50 grand and have no product at the end. So, we try to give those warning signs of what to look for and how you should be hiring software developers to not get screwed over in the long run. Because
that could be a good answer to Michael's question too, as buyers. That's a risk of, do you have to hire your own developers? And that's why I think developers are the best for buying these businesses.
Actually, I love that perspective. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because if you don't know what you're buying, you're going to get taken advantage of.
Yeah, it's just a good chance.
Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you so much. This was awesome. Yeah. I'm sure everyone is thankful for all the knowledge you dropped today. Cool. I learned a lot. I think I have a new perspective, and I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
All right, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good weekend.